Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Hopefully everybody is well and will be better. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Hopefully. I had a little slight technical matter with the audio and had to restart it. I apologize to the people for such. Again, nonetheless, we hope everybody is well and will be better. Hate Africa equals love America, or the people who are into loving America by default hate Africa as a black man. Shalom, my brother Yirmiyahu Yisrael. This presentation is on the channels Mora Yeshaya History Lessons and Mora Yeshaya History Lessons 2. We ask you all to comment, like, and subscribe, brothers and sisters. And what we want to do, and I'm going to ask in due respect, sorry for not starting off in a little better way with the electronics, is if I can be heard well and people are in good spirits, please type in the number 4. If I can be heard well and people are in good spirits, please type in the number 4. We're going to start off, brothers and sisters, in calling upon the Most High, the Creator, the Maker of heaven and earth. Meleka Olam Boreinu Malkeinu Zurenu. Hoshana Amka Yisrael Kiata Moshia We'insha Welaka Bashemayim Ba'aretz. El Gibor Meleka Olam, the mighty power, the King of all that there is. Shemana, hear us. Wata'ane Otanu, and answer us. But Yom Kwar'enu, in the day in which we call. Brothers and sisters, thank you for that, my brother. This is a presentation that I thought of doing, say, sometime last month. And the spirit that caused me to want to do it is reading something that one person was debating another person, if you will, amazingly both being Israelites, online about the matter of whether or not the land of Israel in truth is in America, in the Western Hemisphere. And when I went over and looked at what people were talking about, essentially most of their certifications and sources came from documents that are from America. To be an Israelite and not have the scriptures as your primary source is a red flag, to be quite candid. And what alarmed me is there are certain things that they were just saying. Now, I have used profanity in the past, so I'm not here to say using profanity is a disqualification, but I won't on this platform nonetheless. But to sit there and go so hard to call a person and say, you're not my brother, as has been stated, to go so hard to sit there and say, it's not peace, as has been stated, is pretty ridiculous. One person, when I mentioned my book, From Assyria to America, and about what happened, a person commented on my post by saying, the transatlantic slave trade is a myth and it would have never happened. But yet, while you're claiming to be part of this land here in the West, you have to acknowledge that there were people taken from the Western Hemisphere and shipped to the Eastern Hemisphere. So what happened to them in that case? Would that not be in some way, shape, form, or fashion and part of the Atlantic slave trade? Or is it a matter that a brother is proposing, America the Great, we need our reparations, and so be that. You can't claim the land of the East and then go before the American government and say that you want to sit there and claim this particular land here. See, the two don't work out. The scriptures, if you know yourself as an Israelite, it distinctly says that they shall cast their silver and their gold in the street and it shall be a thing of naught. So while we currently do use the currencies, we do know good and well that that is not what is going to get us by as time goes on. In 1964, Malcolm X spoke about how the American dollar is falling. In 2008, I remember seeing something where the Canadian dollar was gaining more recognition and higher status than that of the American dollar. So how do you call yourself as an Israelite? And even if you don't say that you're an Israelite, how can you, as say a man of color or a woman of color, black person, if you will, sit there and go so vehemently hard to say that this is my land and the land of Israel is over here? Okay, let's just real quick expound upon how the true land of Israel is not here in the Western Hemisphere. The book of Jonah. It said that Jonah went to Joppa to go to Tarshish. Where is Tarshish? Where is Ezion Geber in the book of 1 Kings chapter 10? Where is, quote, the land of the Philistines or the way of the Philistines in Exodus chapter 13? What is the great sea that you see of in the book of Numbers, chapter 34? These are things that when you read the scriptures itself, you would have to be obliged to have to go to some American documentation to say that this is, quote, your true land here, because you can't go through it through the scriptures. The geography that the land of Israel has shown in the scriptures shows that it cannot be here in the Western Hemisphere. I remember when I first encountered that, somebody was trying to expound upon that to me. And so I asked him about the Egypt by ships in Deuteronomy 28. And the response that I got in 2005, almost 20 years ago, I was 25 at the time, 43 now, was, and well, we're still working on that kind of, what do you mean you're still working on it? You mean that we already understood that we were chased into Western African parts and then brought here to the West. But because you essentially, perhaps, I can't say essentially perhaps, but because you essentially want that American dollar and, quote, reparations, you're willing to sit there and make a fool of yourself in geography. You're willing to sit there and not sound intelligent within yourself and to others just for that, quote, bank, if you will. That right there is ridiculous. That right there is ludicrous. You understand? Brothers and sisters, in getting into this subject, I've noticed that people get very much into their feelings. So the question that I have to ask is, if you love this land so much in the West and this is your true land, then why are you spending so much time arguing about it with people that say that we, the people, come from somewhere else? See, the scriptures already told us as Israelites where our true homeland is and what happened with the diaspora. We've gone over that several times on this channel, Mordeh Yeshaya History Lessons. We've gone over the matter of the Atlantic slave trade in so many cases. But I distinctly remember one time a person, I mean, to the point where the person was dropping curse words and profanity, if you will, and all of that. And so I asked, in so many words, take the native language, because you can't say it's Hebrew, take the native language that you're saying that you have over here in the West and translate, my brother, what you just said. What sources do you have? Well, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King said it. Okay, Malcolm X was noted for citing J.A. Rogers in one speech, or in one press conference, should I say. J.A. Rogers wrote a book called Africa's Gift to America, in which in part he talks about the Atlantic slave trade. The former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago was a guy named Eric Williams. And in his book called Documents of West Indian History, he spoke about that as well. Now we're going to take it away from, quote, the Israelites who say something as ludicrous as our true land is over here in the West, and bring it to our people in general, so-called said black people who say such. You will find them upholding the Confederate flag. You will find them, brothers and sisters, up there saying that we are the Moors and Spanish is our language. I've encountered those kind of matters and so forth. And they'll turn right around while saying at one point that slavery ended in 1808. They'll turn right around and sit there and say the first slave master was a black man. And would tell you things such as Abraham Lincoln was black, which he was not. They would tell you things such as Benjamin Franklin was black, which he was not. And the argument seems to be toward people who are saying that we are from the land of the East. It's not with the American government, like Native Americans have sat down with the government of the United States. No, you keep it in many cases straight to online debates back and forth. And ask a question such as the weight of the slave ship, not realizing that they had slave ships that were weighing over 50 tons. A ton is 2,000 pounds. Not realizing that the horses that was used in the American Revolution was brought over in many cases from Europe. So if you have a horse on a ship and the average horse can weigh over 300, 400 pounds, the average healthy person in the slave trade weighed less than 300 pounds, then where is the logic in such a question about the weight matter? If an average cannon needs to be held by 6 people and going up a hill, and there were cannons that were shipped from the continent or so of Europe over here to the Western Hemisphere, why are you asking about the weight on the ship when there were cannons that were used and horses that were brought over in such cases? See, when you have that spirit of hating, for the lack of a better term, hating Africa, you ask silly questions like that. You ask questions such as, oh, well, the people were able to use a hoe in the ground as a tool, and they was able to sit there and plant and do things, and they wouldn't have been able to do that if they didn't know that land. What are you talking about? I learned how to plant and do gardening when I was 7 years old in the Bronx. So now when I'm in South Carolina at the age of 40, 30 or so years after first learning how to do it, all I had to do was just know how to pick it up and just till the ground and everything like that. It wasn't that hard to learn. So you ask simplistic, idiotic questions, and I don't mean to sound offensive in saying this, based upon the fact of what? I want that bank. Everyone else done got reparations. Why haven't we gotten it? So you're willing to, quote, give up the black identity. You're willing to give up, quote, the African-American identity, not because black is a byword, not because African-American is 2 different continents, but simply because you want that bank. You can't give me money for raping my mother and castrating my father. The money that you have on your currency, Washington used to take black people's teeth and use it as his own. Abraham Lincoln put black people back in slavery in 1860s. Did you know that? On the $10 bill, Hamilton was part of the slavery of our people. The $20 bill, Jackson, we already know what he did. He had his own children that he had from black women enslaved. So you got the $50 bill with Grant on it. Grant was a slave master. And the Benjamin that you see on the $100 bill, we already know what these people were about. So that bank that you're looking for, that bank that you hollering about, and that you are upset and worried that somebody else speaking this African-American stuff, quote unquote, this black conscious quote stuff, this we are one of the same people as black Americans or West Indian stuff, that is what you worried about. You worried about that bank not coming to you because everybody else done got their reparations and you want yours, not realizing that you are the people of the Most High God and his hand is going to certainly be put in this earth on account of what happened with us. The North and South had no intention on freeing us as a people. It just so happened, and that happened by the will of the Most High, in what is referred to as the Civil War. You understand? There was no currency, correct me if I'm wrong, that black people were given in that particular case, given the peoples and so forth. They didn't even want us to fight in the war on the north or the south side. So brothers and sisters, as the brother Yirmiyahu wrote in the chat under Mora Yeshaya history lessons, those brothers are plants in the community to stop this truth. And you're absolutely right. Israelites in the 1960s went over to the land of Israel. All of a sudden in the 1970s, you got this a Saw or Set society with that Egyptian pump and stuff. Kanye West said that we, the black people, are the true Hebrews and that the white people are not. Not too long after that, you got Beyonce talking about the goddess Hathor to get us back off the track. You understand? And when we go online and offline and talk about this kind of thing, you got people who are, yes, plants put in there in order to sit there and ask idiotic dodo questions talking about we are indigenous or autochthonous to this Western society. But you have no language that connects it with it. And for you knowing yourself as an Israelite to saying that just don't make any kind of sense. Do you understand? Your argument is not with black people saying that we come from the East. Your argument is first with yourself. Well, first with the Most High, second with yourself. And then if that ain't enough, which it certainly is, your argument in addition to that is you just don't like Africa. That's really what it is. Your theme is not we are truly here and this is our true land. Your theme is we don't like Africa. That's really where it boils down to. And that's why brother called it what he called it. Shalom. This presentation, first let us say it is not to set a bad or sad tone. We want to bring these things out so it will not be forgotten. And this we ask you all to subscribe, comment, like, and share. We hope you are well and will be better. Screenshots of the slides are welcome. Let's continue, brothers and sisters. So let's look at this here. When you start talking about this is your land, right? Lynchings. Illustration. And everything that you see in the red figures indicate the number of lynchings in each state from 1889 to 1921. Are we serious? So when you look at the southern states, we talk in South Carolina 128, Georgia 429, Alabama 292, Florida 201, Louisiana 326, Arkansas 231. You looking at these figures, we easily over 1,000. And the matter between 1889 to 1921. We're talking, brothers and sisters, less than 40 years, over 1,000 people being lynched in this country alone. You understand? What can we say about that? What can possibly be the reason for such? See, in order to sit there and talk about you want, quote, reparations in a form of this man's currency, where we already stated that Washington was a slave master, Lincoln married Mary Todd, who became Mary Todd Lincoln, who was a slave master's family. John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Lincoln, comes from a slaveholding family. And he was going to marry the daughter of a senator of New York. New York's Senate or New York's governors and politicians did not want the amendment that would abolish slavery to pass. So what is there to love? Because our grandparents were born here? Look at what grandma and grandpa went through. And even before them with the sharecropping era of not getting your true matters taken care of. We're having your land taken from you in many cases. Let's continue, brothers and sisters, in this manner. Remember this situation? That's Darren Wilson and Michael Brown some years ago. The cop that you see there on the left-hand side, retired or resigned or so, after he put to death Michael Brown after what he said was an incident that he was supposedly attacked and so forth. He did no time for that, as in the cops with the Sean Bell verdict and many, many more in that particular case. So why do we point this out again? It's not for sad purposes. It's not to bring up something bad, but we don't want to sit there and forget this. But you can't make yourself a hypocrite saying slavery never did happen. And there are some, as the brother pointed out, plants, if you will, people that have been put into the quote community that are actually saying that. Or they'll say something to the effect, as I've heard, well, there wasn't really that many. It was only 500,000 that was brought to America. And the hatred that is spilt regarding the West Indies is amazing. You can't stand Jamaicans. You don't like Trinidadians. You don't like Bajans. You can't stand Haitians. You don't like Panamanians. You don't have any respect for those of other islands. And when you talk about the slave trade in Brazil, it's, well, those are not my people. Not realizing, as we're going to point out, that the same ship that went to Brazil also went to Virginia by the same captains. So it is a quote unquote pro-Black American move, not realizing, brothers and sisters, that we Black Americans, and I'm just using that term loosely for edification purposes, and we West Indians, we need each other. Did you know that? There is a movement, if you want to call it that, of Black people saying that West Indians come to the United States and benefit off of the struggles that Black Americans have put in. Really? Did they benefit from it? Or did the people that come out of Mexico that have a caste system that says the African is at the bottom of it and the people of Spain are the top of it? Who benefited from it? Brothers and sisters, when people from the West Indies come over into high school and get left back from the 10th grade to the 9th grade because they felt that your education maybe in the parish was not as quote high. You understand? Look at Shine, a brother that's from the Caribbean. He did something that wasn't the smartest or the brightest. Became in the understanding to call himself Moshe Ben Lewi. And he also got deported. See, the people talking about, we were here already, and this is our land here in America, and yeah, the real Egypt is over here, and you got Israelites saying, yeah, the real land of Israel's over here. They hate the people from the Caribbean. Real talk. I've conversed with them offline. While praising Malcolm X, maybe forgetting that his mother's from Grenada. Of 100 slave ships, only 6 came to what we call the United States. The West went to Brazil, South America, and other parts of South America, and the West went to the Caribbean. And it is done on the other way as well. And that is, you have people from the West Indies who despise quote unquote Black Americans. I heard it inside of Jamaican restaurants. I heard it when visiting some of my friends' families. And so forth. Ignorant statements that are made. Black Americans don't get houses. They always rent rooms and apartments. You understand? Back home in my country, it was better kind of situation. Where I'm living at now in Brooklyn is better than where I was living in Harlem. And there's no knock on Harlem. But I can't live somewhere and then sit there and say it was better over there, because now you're making yourself like a fool, if you will. You understand? So in order for us to truly see any kind of understanding as a people, we have to eliminate that Willie Lynch concept. Willie Lynch wasn't a real person. Okay, neither was maybe Jim Crow. Maybe not a real person. But we know of the Jim Crow matter. You understand? Only a slave will tell another one, my struggle was harder than yours, so I'm different than you. You know what Black Americans sound like? Saying that we in North America, in the United States, even though Jamaica and the other places of the Caribbean is part of North America, we went through things harder than you. You sound like the field slave and the house slave in the South. It's harder for me than for you, so we're different. You had it better than I did. I wasn't able to because I was doing this presentation and putting it together. But there's a picture that goes around online that says what? Two black men in a slave ship, and one saying to the other, my chain is shinier than yours. And the other one says, we're still in the same boat. You understand? I'm being asked, what's your take on Israel-Palestine issue? Interesting. Thank you for asking that. Dr. Sebi approved. I see the comment and question that you asked. I spoke on that earlier in a presentation. So, but real quick to answer your question, you got two sets of people that know something that neither one is being totally honest about. Both the Israelis, the Jewish people, and the Palestinians, they know who the true house of Israel is, or who the true house of Israel are, sorry. But neither one does seem to be coming full force with it. So that's my take on it in a nutshell. Yeah, what the brother typed in, damn, my chain is shinier than yours and we're both in the same boat. You understand? I know of the fact, no disrespect intended while bringing this kind of stuff out, that in many cases, they from the Caribbean are taught you are better than the Black American children. They are taught that in many cases, not all 100%, but in their houses. And when you talk about it with brothers and sisters from the islands, even those who know themselves as Israel, it's like, oh, damn, you know? Like, in other words, you was never supposed to know what their grandparents taught them. You were just supposed to be the way the European man expects us or the white man expects us to be, just totally oblivious to anything that's going on. You understand? On what you want to call, quote, both sides, that kind of concept has to be eradicated. So, brothers and sisters, let's look at this right here. What can we see concerning that? Darren Wilson and Michael Brown, among the many other cases. Remember this? Let's move on, family. Really? He said what? In the top picture, Steve Harvey's in the studio, and his advice to a white woman that's in Greensboro, North Carolina, when Black people talk about certain things in history, he said to say, and quote, I don't give a damn about slavery. That's his advice to a white woman about what to say to Black people when Black people talk about history. Correct me if I'm wrong, that lady wasn't even asking about slavery, but just history. And his response that he found so funny was to say that this white woman should sit there and state to Black people, I don't give a quote damn about slavery. Now let's see what happened later on. Here we see him with his wife, who slept with the security guard and the chef, and said, now he's saying, I need some private time for my wife, excuse me to have to say it, a hoe, a harlot, a jump off, if you will, loose or out there, if you will. See, this is what happens, and is not trying to play judge, when you can sit there and say to a person of another race about your people should be told, I don't give, quote, a damn about slavery. So now when your show is replaced with other peoples of other nations, and then you wind up with a woman who had 2 failed marriages. The first marriage was with a person who's a convicted drug dealer. The second marriage is with his cousin. You marry her, treat her children that's not from you better than the children that come from you. And she's sleeping around with other people. That is what, and I hate to have to say it, not playing judge, in part what you get. Because when he told Monique, the comedian, he being a comedian himself, what? I got my children and my grandchildren. And it's about not so much the integrity game, but the money game. And Monique, the comedian, was trying to tell him on the show, it is about the integrity game before the money game. And all the people in the audience was clapping at what he was saying. Like, yeah, it's about the money game. And now she might be taking half with her, as he calls her, whole self. See what happens when you play coon, as the brother put the coon picture in there. Total, thank you for that, my brother. This is the result of what happens when you hate your own and love the oppressors. You thought it was funny sitting up there doing something like that. That was your advice to say, I don't give a damn about slavery. Now, I wanted to put this up there and get into this because what we're going to talk about, in part, is some of the things that happened during the matter of slavery and even after. Brothers and sisters, I'd like to take out the time, if we will, and I want to show this in a book that I have, all right, if we will, for reference purposes and so forth. Right? And this is something that struck me, brothers and sisters, very, very much, if you will. Right? I have a book here, and I want to show this on the camera. This book here is called Without Sanctuary, The History of Lynching of Stuff in the United States. And here's a picture that was more so put on a postcard and sent regarding the matter of our people being hung. And this is in the state of Kentucky, if you will. There's over 50 pictures of brothers and sisters, our people, male and female alike, to be shown in such manner. See, this is the stuff that also happened in slavery. If they were lynching after slavery, you know they was lynching during it. And these are just things, brothers and sisters, that we care to show for reference purposes, if we will. All right, these things is put on postcards. And Steve Harvey is up there done told the people to sit there and state, I don't, quote, give a damn about slavery. Now you've been blessed with a woman who don't, quote, give a damn about you, because you up there talking about it is about the money game and your children, while you put another woman's and another man's children over your own. See, this is the result. See, he got hung himself. You understand? Because now the woman that you were with is sitting up there and playing a harlot, if you will, for horrible purposes. And we want to point this out, brothers and sisters. This is not pictures I made up. I got this from the book that I bought out of Barnes & Noble. And who are we seeing right here? They are teaching their children this kind of stuff. See, these are things that, no disrespect, I probably wouldn't bring out on the Shabbat. You understand? Because of the timing and so. But these are things, brothers and sisters, we definitely do not want to have forgotten for reference purposes. All right? We want to show another reference, if we will, brothers and sisters. Hopefully everybody is well and will be better. All right? And this comes from a college book called, pardon the cover, I had this for over 20 years, From Slavery to Freedom. I had this from when I was a student in the college that I wound up teaching in BMCC, Borough Manhattan Community College. All right, let's look at this right here. The Shame of America. Do you see that right there? This is from a college reference book. These are the people that Steve Harvey sat there and said to say, I don't, quote, give a damn about slavery. it said what? 3,436 people lynched from 1889 to 1922. National Association for the Advancement of Colored People put this out, brothers and sisters. And this is what is the shame of America. So when you have people talking about this is my land, then you need to sit there and do what the NAACP was about and trying to get reparations and closure for that matter. Arguing with people that say we come from the land of the East is not your remedy, brothers and sisters. So we're going to go over some more references as this goes on, but let's continue in this particular manner, right? It goes on to say this. What was stated in the 17th century, the Desire, which was the name of a slave ship, mainly going to the West Indies, brought slaves to Connecticut. The gentleman John Winthrop, that you see right there, governor of the colony, stated William Pierce, the master of the ship, brought some cotton and tobacco and Negroes, etc., and from thence to Tortugas, which is over by the area of today known as Haiti and Dominican Republic. So going to the Caribbean/West Indies, the ships were coming from Africa to the West Indies, and then from the West Indies to the United States. So these are things that we want to point out, and we have to ask people talking about, well, there's no evidence of there being slave ships. We was already here. And when they say, quote, and I say this in no disrespect, we were already here. Who are we? Me, Anaknu. Who are we that was already here? And what is our flag? What is our language? What is our culture? What is your future? What do your teachers state? What do your prophets of old state? What do your wise men and elders state? Because even Oluda Equiano, mentioned several times on his platform, he talks about his wise men and elders back among the Igbo in Nigeria before he was shipped over to the West Indies as a slave. Where are your wise men and elders? It can't be somebody that just came since the YouTube era. That's not an elder that comes from way back when. This is why a brother likes to cite old sources from different things so we can get information out for edification purposes. Brothers and sisters, let's continue. Notes and subscribe. William, a Dutchman, in 1625, received a license to trade slaves in Brazil, Virginia, and New Guinea. So when we talk about the slave trade in Brazil, and you find people say, oh, you're talking about another place. See, because you can't get reparations in the form of their currency while you're claiming people that were brought to Brazil as well. It's a money grab, brothers and sisters. And then talking online with Caucasians say about this, but then again, you never know who's behind the platform, or the computer. No reparations. You acting like people asking for reparations in the form of money is coming out of your pocket. Don't get in your feelings. You understand? So it goes on to say here, John Russell, who was one of the leaders among Parliament, in 1846 spoke of a 1/3 of the captives dying on the journey to the coast to the ships. In 1730, we see 6,000 blacks as slaves in North Carolina, purchased in Virginia. So if you had people in the 1620s being brought to Virginia, and then in the 1730s, we see them from Virginia being taken as captives into North Carolina. Let's go in. Also, 14 Negro wrenches, females, ranging from age 16 to 25 years of age. Brothers and sisters, my precious daughter is 17. I'm 43. My little princess is 17 years old. So when they start talking about wrenches, they're not excluding people like my princess and many of our other daughters from age 16 to 25 years of age, or sound and capable of a good day's work in the house or field. That was part of the flyers that went around about our people. So when we have, and I say this in no disrespect, this guy right here saying, I don't give a damn about slavery, with a stern face, if you will, and then laughing. You see him in a later picture with a smile on his face, but in reality, it ain't happiness. Because one thing, and it's not that I'm a relationship expert, when a woman knows that you a fool, that you a sucker, that you easily to be able to walk on, you have no backbone in yourself, even though I say a woman is a man's backbone, she still expect you to have a backbone of self. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get a Marjorie in that case who's going to sit there and look for another man while she has no respect for you as a man. And it doesn't make it right what she did. It just goes to show you what it is. In the 1850s, writes Philip Drake, there was a slave depot established in Honduras for captives from Africa to be brought to the U.S. by way of Louisiana or Florida. And for those who study the history, Texas as well. Louisiana, Florida, and Texas. You know, those places were ran by the Spanish and the French before the United States government got it. Florida was co-founded by Ponce de Leon in the matter of the 16th century. Texas, brothers and sisters, was operated by the Spaniards. It was part of Mexico of today. Louisiana, brothers and sisters, was ran by the Spanish before the French got it. So these are things that we want to point out for reference purposes. So what are we talking about? What are you saying when you have this kind of information out there and still going on? Well, you know, we want our reparations. What can they possibly pay you for hanging a woman upside down and cutting the baby out? What we need to do as Black Americans and what we need to do as West Indians is apologize to each other for the disrespect we taught our children about each other. What we need to do as Black men is apologize to our Black women. What we need to do is apologize, and I'm not a woman, but for the sisters to apologize to the brothers. We need inner healing before you start going before some government talking about, we demand our money and our reparations that's due to us. For what? So you can sit there and get it taxed and for you to give it back in your own economy? That's not intelligent. You understand? Let's go on to free will, brothers and sisters. Subscribe to the channel, please. Notes in a matter of history. In 1591, Empire of Songhai fell to the Spaniards and Moors. The Moors we are speaking of are those who were kicked out from Spain by Isabel and Ferdinand in 1492. The Spanish were heavily involved in the slave trade. In 1494, we know a treaty of Tordesillas or Tordesillas, in which Spain and Portugal divided the Western Hemisphere for themselves. The natives were enslaved first, then a two-faced gentleman, we're going to keep the language clean, made a petition to King of Spain, Charles V, this guy by the name of Bartolome de las Casas, to have slaves brought from Africa to come west. In 1529, Spain and Portugal made the Treaty of Zaragoza, in which it was sanctioned by John II, John III and Charles V. John III was the king of Portugal, and Charles V was the king of Spain. The Jacinto too, in time, came into play. All those treaties and sanctions were Spain's mental justification to enslave others. So now, Black Americans, when we start to talk about reparations and we were truly in this land here first and all that kind of side talk, if you will, you forgot about those that were taken from Africa to Honduras, and then from Honduras into Texas, part of the U.S., Louisiana, part of the U.S., and Florida, part of the U.S. But you know what? Texas, Florida, and Louisiana were not part of the original 13 colonies. I pointed that out in a book called From Assyria to America, brothers and sisters, part 2, for those interested online. The English controlled Jamaica, the Bahamas, Antigua, St. Kitts, Barbuda, Nevis, Montserrat, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Thomas, Barbados, Trinidad, first controlled by the Spanish, because Trinidad is a Spanish word for Trinity. Tobago, the Virgin Islands, Tortola, the Virgin Islands, St. Croix, St. Thomas, and St. Martin. No, pardon me. St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. Vincent. I stand corrected. Sorry about that. To those places, and some of them, you don't even need a passport, but it don't hurt to have it. So what do we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for reference purposes? And no disrespect intended, we want to show so it won't be forgotten. We're going to be a little raw in this matter, if we will, brothers and sisters. All right? And again, I mean no offense to anyone whatsoever. We're going to cite this book here, Without Sanctuary, to the people talking about we need the American government to give us our, quote, reparations. What reparations in money form do you want for this? Pardon the picture. His buttocks is out, brothers and sisters. What can they pay you for doing this to our great uncles and grandfathers? What revenue can they do to compensate for doing that to another person? Taking a picture and got a pine box ready for such. What revenue can they give you for doing this to our people? Please explain that one. These are things, brothers and sisters, we're going to show this throughout this presentation for reference purposes, if we will. So it will not, quote, be forgotten, brothers and sisters. Let's continue. Notes in what was stated in the 18th century. There were over 30 slaveholding houses alone in Ghana, the place of the Ashanti. Since they really fell in Europeans' hands, the Ashanti that is, we can see the average number given as the amount of captives brought over is not accurate. The average number given of the captives brought to Brazil is 5 to 13 million. That's the difference of amount of the people in New York City, which they say is 8 million. According to D. Mannix in Black Cargoes, A History of the Atlantic Slave Trade, we see concerning Alexander Falconbridge, some wet and blowing weather, having occasion of portholes to be shut and a grating to be covered. Fluxes and fevers among the Negroes ensued. I wouldn't wish or hope that on anyone. I had a fever before. It is a very horrible experience. The deck, that is the floor of their rooms, was so covered with blood and mucus, which had proceeded from them in consequence of the flux. Do you know where the mucus came from? Take a guess. When you have a smallpox inside the slave ships and so forth, the mucus came from two different orifices of the man. One's mouth, one's penile or private part area. So when this Alexander Falconbridge said that the floor of their rooms was so covered with blood and mucus, which had proceeded from them in consequence of the flux. Flux is in relation to what today we call gonorrhea or syphilis. That it resembled a slaughterhouse. You ever seen a slaughterhouse? That's how they said the slave ships were. A market of diseases from one continent to the next. What are you talking about? We didn't go through that. While you're sitting up there at the same token talking about we want the reparations. And you can't pay me for what I've been reading right here. They hardly pay us good enough for the jobs that we do. And the rents that they charge is exorbitantly, if that's a word, pardon me if I mispronounced it, too high. So let's go on, brothers and sisters, and continue. If I can be heard and people in good spirits, please type in the number 4. The French controlled Guadeloupe and Martinique. The Spanish controlled Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Santo Domingo. The Dutch controlled St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. The captive markets in South America were not closed. The Portuguese controlled Brazil. The Spanish controlled Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. The English controlled Guyana. The Dutch controlled Suriname. In Central America, the Spanish controlled Mexico, Panama, and Honduras. The French controlled Canada until they lost it in 1763, in which France gave Canada to Britain. Remember, in 1763, there was no United States of America. It was still the colonies, brothers and sisters. So in 1763, when France lost Canada, they gave it to Britain. France controlled the Midwest portion of what became the United States until the era of Thomas Jefferson, when Napoleon sold it to the United States. What do we want to point out with Napoleon? Napoleon was the person that helped reinstituted the French slave trade of our ancestors going to Haiti. And I emphasize our ancestors. I'm not going to sit here being born in the United States talking about my people or the Americans. You see what happens as a black man when you don't claim your own, even if the story is not the happiest? This is what happens. This is your portion. Because this is not to be disrespectful. It said the wicked woman is the portion of a wicked man in the book of the Apocrypha. There you go right there. That's your gift. You get a woman sleeping with another man. Your friend, if you will. So-called friend, if you will. That's what you get right there. When you the guy on the top telling the white woman, I don't just say to black people, I don't give a damn about slavery. This is your portion for the future. She's sleeping with the chef, bruh. The man who makes the food. She's sleeping with the security guard. I do security work. You know what they're called? Toy cops and suckers. That's who she went to. Because knowing the kind of character, talking about it's about the money game before the integrity game, you done lost the show. And it was given to another person in place of you. So while everybody is up there talking about you had something to do with Bernie Mac's demise, what can you say for yourself? This is the result of that. So what we going to gain by saying we want reparations in the form of their currency, knowing that all the presidents on them, brothers and sisters, done did certain things. You understand? These are things, brothers and sisters, we care to, quote, bring out for edification purposes, if we will. You understand? I have, and I'm not the richest, but I want to just show this for reference purposes, right? If we will. And this is not saying that we don't need money, because in this society we do. Let's look. You have here Washington, George Washington, on the $1 bill, right? And what does it say? This note is legal tender for all debts, private and public. So let's look. This note, this is a note, no different than if I write on a piece of paper and say, this means I'm going to pay you what I owe you. You understand? We have here a $10 bill, and it says the same thing. This note is legal tender for all debts, private and public. And it goes on and on, brothers and sisters. On this, we see, brothers and sisters, on the back side of it, Inuit coeptis. Our project has been crowned with success. In Latin. And what is it under the pyramid? Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new order of the world. There are 13 layers to the pyramid and what they call the eye of the Illuminati upon such. The Illuminati was an organization that came to the United States in 1776, May 1st thereof. So why they call it May Day might be due to that for those who are into that kind of information. On this, we see, brothers and sisters, on the curvature on the $1 bill, the little owl, for those who are interested, right? That little owl represents Day of the Bohemians. And in the month of July, and I remember working in a certain building in the city, a particular company closed down, brothers and sisters, concerning them going over to Bohemian Grove and worshiping Molech, one of the gods of the ancient nations, and having mock sacrifices of people. This is something we want to bring out, brothers and sisters. So now when the Hilton Hotel and other hotels have been exposed, say 2 months ago, for having children inside of their basement, what were you doing? Whatever happened to all the children that you used to see on the milk cartons back in the 1980s? Because we have to remember, brothers and sisters, after this done stopped in mass production, they winded up talking about taking the children. When that C-19 virus and epidemic and so on was going on, you notice they were talking about get your children back in school, get your children back in school. Why were you so, excuse my language, hell bent on making sure get the children, get the children? Do you remember when that person's intestines was taken out inside of the gym and he was found on a mat? What are they doing in that particular case, brothers and sisters? Well, in part, not being funny, this book talks about it. Without Sanctuary. This book gets into how they took out people's intestines and sold it. Your ears, your penis, your gallbladder, your stomach, and things of that kind of nature was put on for sale for their own weird purposes. You understand? They used to refer to that as a necktie party, brothers and sisters. And this has, as I stated, over 50 pictures, but this one right here is what really shocked me. I don't know why, but this one of all of them really did shock me. Organ harvesting. Thank you for pointing that out, my brother. That's what they're doing in that particular case. So your argument cannot be with those who are saying we come from the land of the East. Because in the land of the West, it has not been the best. This is the land of the thief and the home of the slave. Brothers and sisters. Not the land of the free and the home of the brave. The average white man from this country is a descendant from a criminal, because you are the outlaws and the outbandits of Europe itself and came over here to the West. The majority of the black people over here in the West are war captives that were sold by one people and given to another people after a particular people fled into a particular land. Those who already know where we're going know what it is. Because Africans didn't sell Africans. Africans sold Israelites. Let's go in. Notes on why the Black American and West Indian are not to be separated, and subscribe. We're asking you to subscribe to the channel, comment, like, and share. Thank you. The French controlled Guadeloupe and Martinique. Okay, I already read that, but I just wanted to put the subscribe part in there because I remember I went back up and then came back. Thank you. All righty, so let's conclude with this clown that we see right here. Balboa had 30 blacks as slaves when he went to the Pacific Ocean, this being in 1513. Cortez, in the issue with Mexico conquest, had 300 blacks as slaves, this being in 1519. Vasquez alone in 1526 brought black people as slaves to what is now the Carolinas. That's Jesse Lee Peterson. He's a black man that said white people didn't come in droves and took us, as captives and slavery. And the conscious community, the bridge that come off saying that we are autonomous and we are from this land here in the West, they cited him and had to be compelled to say that even if you're citing a coon to sit there and get your point across, then so be it. So these white men that wrote these things in books about them being the slave masters, they just wrote something because they had nothing better to write? Or was it expected that, quote, Negroes will never read? Were we ever expected to pick up something to read and cross-reference? No. Remember, it was a crime for us to even know how to read, and it was a crime to teach us how to read. What were you trying to hide by us not knowing how to read? You can fact check this kind of information in these days and times. This is one of their leaders that go around saying, essentially, that we were not brought over by white people as slaves. He's one of the people that go online and on different programs and so forth and say such. So all of the references that we talked about from King Ferdinand and Isabella and John III of Spain. And for those who do know about Sir John Hawkins and Queen Elizabeth, the daughter of Queen Mary, and Sir Francis Drake, and all of those kind of people that you read of in history, I guess that's all made up. White man had nothing better to do but just sit there and write himself down as the enslavers, huh? And if that is the case, then what are you going for reparations for if slavery didn't happen? If we were not oppressed, as many people in the world were oppressed, what are you going to sit there at the table and say, what do you do to get, quote, reparations and to repair something? Because that's what reparations is. It's about reparations are about repairing. What are you repairing if this is your land, baby? You home. Your language is English. You was made to toil and labor all week long. And even sometimes on holy days as an Israelite. No. Just admit, in order to, brothers and sisters, as some people want the bank, the guap, if you will, a lot of this kind of stuff here, you are willing to throw your people under the bus. Steve Harvey did. See what he got as a tokenism for such, right? See, this is what happens. We're going to point that out, and we're going to show some more pictures and go over some more references for edification purposes. And I'm pardon the language in part because we're not even dealing in profanity. Really, he said what? I don't give a damn about slavery. Now he's up there saying, I need some private time for my wife as a hoe. If our ancestors could talk to Steve Harvey, would they say that he was a sellout? Would they say that he went around and slept in the bed with the devil, as the saying goes? Will they say that he went to bed with the dog and caught fleas? Because remember, in our records, Israel, in the Apocrypha, it distinctly says that the wicked woman is the portion of a wicked man. So when you're saying to Monique that integrity is not as important as getting, quote, that bank or that money, now you got someone with no integrity who is looking to take half of your money. That's your portion. Brothers, let's not go out like Mr. Harvey. You understand? Let's not have that in our record because she want to sit there and sleep with the cook. You understand? Here you are, a multimillionaire, done been around since, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the late 80s, and I know in the 90s you was there, being famous. And like it says in the scriptures about Ephraim, he willingly walked after filth. You didn't understand your position. Black people talking about, we were here already. Just like Steve Harvey didn't understand his position. And you walked willingly after filth. And that's gross. Future presentations. We already did the one here. No one loves America more than one who hates Africa. Artifacts of ancient Israel. Mori Yeshaya history lessons. Honoring of to presence and ownership. Slavery in the Continental Congress. All of that being under Mori Yeshaya history lessons. I'm going to leave this here, brothers and sisters, on the screen. You can take a screenshot, so forth, in that particular case, right? Now, this is not, I'm not trying to say what that lady did, Steve Harvey's wife, was right. But when you're doing wrong, you're going to be settled with that which isn't right. You understand? When you're not living upright, and I'm not saying any one of us is perfect, but that's going to be your portion, if you will. You understand? So what do we want to point out? I have a book here called Black Culture and Black Consciousness by Samuel Levine. And in this, we see the following, if we will, brothers and sisters. On page 41, it says, slave broke the prescription against unsupervised or unauthorized meetings by holding their services in secret. Well-hidden areas, usually referred to as hush harbors. Amanda McCrae testified that on her Florida plantation, there was a praying ground where the grass never had a chance to grow for the troubled knees that kept it crushed down. And Andrew Moss remembered that on the Georgia plantation where he grew up, all the slaves had their private prayer grounds. My mammy's was an old, twisted, thick-rooted muscadine bush. She'd go in there and prayed for deliverance of the slaves. Even here, the slaves were often discovered by the white patrols. Then they would rush and start whipping and beating the slaves unmerciful. Wes Turner of Virginia reported, and do you know, some of them devils were mean and sinful enough to say, if I catch you here serving God, I'll beat you. You ain't got no time to serve God. We brought you to serve us. That comes out of this book here, brothers and sisters. This is documented from the accounts of slaves themselves. So when you start talking about slavery wasn't here and slavery wasn't so bad and so forth and so on, you want that bank from the European American white man so much to where you are willing to sit there and, pardon the term, defecate on your own people on what happened in order to gain it. That is not good. On a Louisiana plantation, the slaves would gather in the woods at night, form a circle on their knees, and pray over a vessel of water to drown the sound. They could shout and sing all they wanted to, the noise wouldn't go outside. So praying and singing is something that as a people we've been doing. But brothers and sisters, if we know their currency, and I'm not saying we don't need funds in this society, I'm not saying that. If their currency has Washington, who was a slave trader, Lincoln, who put black people back into slavery, Hamilton, who did not oppose the slave trade, Jackson, who was so happy that slavery did exist, Grant, who was a slave master himself, and Franklin, Benjamin Franklin, who was a part of it himself, during what is referred to as the Continental Congress. No, we can't endorse that, brothers and sisters. That is not something that we can encourage and support. This presentation, as we were saying, is not to spread sad or bad feelings, but rather that those things be not forgotten. Brothers and sisters, I have a book here called African People in European Holidays, A Mental Genocide. And on page 50 of this book, we see this. The English language, once considered to be vulgar and profane speech by the aristocracy of Europe, is the official language of the United States. English is rooted in the Anglo-Saxon tongues, which, according to Higgins, meaning Godfrey Higgins, is a remnant of the original tongues taught to the ancient Saxons by the blacks and bears traces of the Ethiopian language left behind by the Iberians who first inhabited the British Isles. There are still many Hebrew, Indian, Arabic, and Ethiopian words in the language today. As a matter of fact, during the American Revolution, there was a popular proposal to replace English with Hebrew as the official language of the United States. Hebrew was believed by the colonists to be the mother of all tongues. And until 1817, the annual commencement addresses at Harvard were delivered in Hebrew. That's coming out of this book here. That English was going to be replaced with Hebrew as the official language. Can we perhaps think or surmise why Hebrew would not be that as the official language of the United States? I can count the number of times I've been asked, why do you speak Hebrew? One of the most poignant times, or one of the most deepest times, if I may say, I was 29 years old and I was in Green Acres Mall, for those who do know where it's at. And it was the timing around of what we just came from called Chag Sukkot, or the Feast of Booths. And they had the thing that they shake, the esrog and the lulav and so forth, right? So I walked up to them and I said, Ma shalom kem, which means asking, how are you all? What is yours peace? And they looked back and they said, oh, we okay, we good. And they're staring at me like, because I didn't have on my kippah, so I had on regular clothes. They're looking at me like, why do you speak Hebrew? See, they're not going to ask me, Lama ata medaber Ibrit, because see, we're not supposed to know Hebrew. So they're not going to ask me in Hebrew, why do I speak Hebrew? I was asked such in English. Why do you speak Hebrew? The response was not in English, Kivraziti, because I want to. And he said, no. He asked me, why do I speak Hebrew? So the answer I immediately gave was, Atasha al-Tani. And then they nodded their head like, yo, he really know it. And it's not to sound arrogant. I'm 29 at the time. Atasha al-Tani. Lama ani medaber Ibrit. Ki raziti. You asked me, Kisha al-Tani. Lama ani medaber. Why do I speak Ibrit, Hebrew? Ki raziti, because I want to. And he said to his friend next to him, he said raziti, like I'm not standing there. He said, like I'm not standing there. Talking in the third person to your friend while in my presence. That shows you, while they're amazed that you speak Hebrew, they don't respect you as a man because they're talking about you in the third person right in front of your face. So we're not going to get what we think as quote reparations from them in that case. And if they were to quote pay it off, which they can't, because you cannot pay off, brothers and sisters, doing this, if you will, to people. You can't give nobody something like that. There's no payment for that. That's a murder. That's a murder. See, it's contradictory in closing out to say we were here already and we want to get our reparations. Your reparations, if this was your true land, is to have the people who are not indigenous or autonomous to this land exited out. That's the solution. Not take the currency with their dead presidents on it, knowing what they did to our ancestors. That's not the resolution. In that case, sad to say, you're trying to deal with a money grab like that guy, young Pharaoh, did with the lady who was murdered by the police. And her family even asked him to cease and desist on making that a subject, if you will. And as we go on, brothers and sisters, as we've shown this earlier, if you will, they are teaching their children this. So what happens when they who love America and hate Africa, when this is presented? There are black people who do wrong by black people. That's true. There are white people who do wrong by white people. I was watching something about the mafia, if you want to use that term, and they said a guy named Roy DeMeo killed over 90-something people, who was later killed in 1983 by the orders of Paul Castellano, who was killed by the orders of John Gotti, who got snitched on by Sammy the Bull. See, there are white people, yes, who do wrong by white people, but that's not a black people's problem. So anytime we talk about what has happened with us, brothers and sisters, what happens? It is, hey, what about the wrong that black people do to black people? That's not what we're talking about, Sambo. We're talking about the matter in one particular case. If we were to talk about the things that black people done with black people, if that was the subject initially, then that'd be different. You understand? I'm being asked if I'm seeing right. In Second Ezra, it speaks about the land of Osiris. Do you know where that land is located? And when you read in the book of Ezra, chapter 13, it says that they took counsel among themselves and decided to go to a land where no man has dwelt and decided to live there. To my knowledge, that land would be still in the east, in what we call today in part of Africa. Not what some brothers, and no disrespect intended, what some sisters teach by saying that must be over here in the Western Hemisphere. You understand? So hopefully that answered your question, my friend, my brother, Shamar, in that particular case. In the book that I wrote, brothers and sisters, if I may show it for reference purposes, I talked about that matter that you see of in the Apocrypha, much more in detail. You can get this book online as well, brothers and sisters. Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68. History, pardon the cover, untold to the masses. Pardon me. History untold to the masses, yes. And this here, from Assyria to America. In that particular case, for those who do want it and who are interested in such. We hope and pray, brothers and sisters, that everybody is well and will be better. We ask you all to comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. More than Yeshaya history lessons. We intend, as you can see there with the list of presentations to come in the future, to get into more matters concerning this kind of subject, if you will. I apologize for not doing any presentations last night. I was exhausted and I needed some physical rest, even on the day of rest, in that particular manner. So brothers and sisters, if we will, be encouraged, not discouraged. Let the avenging of the blood of thy servants that have been shed be made known among the nations in our sight. Psalm 79. Let the avenging of the blood of your people, Yah, be made known among the nations in the sight of Israel. Abraham Lincoln, in his inaugural speech in his second run for president and winning it, said for every stroke of the lash was there a soldier that was killed in the Civil War. So when he started talking about the Civil War and what happened, according to Abraham Lincoln, he stated that that happened on the sin of America having our people being enslaved. We went over earlier about the timeline regarding slavery. And in recapping this, we want to emphasize that the BA, Black American, and WI, West Indian man, women and child have no reason to sit there and not apologize to each other for telling its quote size children that you're better than the other. Black Americans are lazy. People from the Caribbean are witches. That's the stuff that was being told during the era of Marcus Garvey. Did you know that there were Israelites that was in the Garvey movement? If you want to use that term, Garvey movement. So Israel, we need to raise the bar. We have to sit there and get certain things done. You understand? And don't be a sidebar hater, brothers and sisters, that sit there and say it ain't just about just doing the Hebrew. It is for the people who teach Hebrew to do that. If your portion is different, then do your portion. To the people who's about nutrition, let that be. To the people who's about growth and development, let that be. But you don't sit there and take a person whose spirit is geared in one way that is a benefit and say, oh, don't worry about that, because that spirit right there will lead you to a Marjorie. That spirit right there will lead you to a Jada with Will. That spirit right there will lead you to a Tretch from Naughty by Nature if you're a woman like that. For those who do know, brothers and sisters. You understand? And again, this is not trying to play prophet or anything of that sort, brothers and sisters. Another thing in closing out with the time allotted that we care to bring out, brothers and sisters, is what's done in the dark come to the light, and things do come out, brothers and sisters. 20-something years later, this guy is in the jail saying Puffy had him set up to sit there and put Tupac to death. Who would have ever known all these years later that this guy in the media was going to become what they call a canary? You understand? You don't get away, brothers and sisters. You don't sit there and slither and slide through and everything will be okay. And if we can't do that with each other, then we know the nations can't do it with us. And if we know the nations can't do it with us, then we know we can't do that with each other. Psalm 79 in closing out, if we will, brothers and sisters, after the things that we've gone over and spoke upon in this. Asking you to subscribe to the channel, to comment, like, and share. Psalm 79 reads as follows. O Elohim, the heathen are coming to thine inheritance. Thy holy temple they have defiled. They have laid Jerusalem into heaps. So from the era of the Babylonians right down to the era of the Romans, it said the heathen have come into thy temple. The dead bodies of your servants have they given to be meat unto the fowls of the heaven, the flesh of thy saints unto the beasts of the earth. Brothers and sisters, they have given the dead bodies of the servants of the Most High to be given to the beasts of the earth. What do you think happened when our people was lynched, as we shown in those pictures? What do you think happened to their bodies, brothers and sisters? These are things we care to bring out for reference purposes, if we will. You understand? One of the things, too, we care to bring out, brothers and sisters, it teaches us in the Apocrypha, First Maccabees, that they used to take, the Greeks used to come and take babies of Israelites and hang them and lynch them. So when we begin to see what truly happened with us as a people, it's very sad. But it's not to bring up something sad, but just to remember to bring it up so it won't be forgotten, because they want us to forget about it. No, that cannot be forgotten. We was already good in sports before they found Michael Jordan. We was already good in sports before they found Dwight Gooden. So putting a black man who's already given a talent as a people and shining one in that particular way, or one shining in that particular way, that's not reparations. We already had that talent. We came here with that talent. We came here talented. So for us to make it in a particular sport is not a reparations matter. We had it already. It's like you having the ability to cook and somebody cannot cook and they're telling you, I'm going to allow you to cook. No, you're going to let that person cook because you can't. You need that person with your non-cooking self to cook for you. You understand? So it's not something that you're already given by the Most High God as a talent that someone is allowing you to do. Don't let your blessings get shortchanged like that by haters. Their blood have they shed like water round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them. We are become a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and derision to them that are round about us. How long, Yah? Wilt thou be angry forever? Shall thy jealousy burn like fire? Pour out thy wrath upon the heathen that know thee not, and upon the kingdoms that call not upon thy name. For they have devoured Jacob and laid waste his dwelling place. When we show about the land of Israel and the maps in that desert land on either side of the Jordan, they have laid the pleasant land into heaps. Remember not against us former iniquities. Let thy tender mercy speedily come to reach us, for we are brought very low. Help us, O power, God of our salvation, for the glory of thy name, and deliver us, and purge away our sins for thy name's sake. Wherefore should the nations say, the heathen say, where is their God? Let it be known among the heathen in the sight of the revenging of the blood of thy servants which has been shed. Let the sign of the prisoner come before thee, according to the greatness of thy power. Set free those that are appointed to death, and render unto our neighbors sevenfold into their bosom their reproach, wherewith that reproach thee, O Yah. So, unto our neighbors, in other words, they who are not of our peoples and people, render unto them sevenfold into their bosom for the reproach. Not we going to get their money and spend it right back into their economy. So we that are thy people in the sheep of thy pasture will give thee thanks forever. We will show off thy praise from generations, for generations. So when we read, brothers and sisters, in Psalm 79, and we read right here where we are told to not pray in slavery, there's a reason why they didn't want us to. Shalom. Most High bless. Have a good night.